Thank you, Madam Chair. Our United States Constitution was not written to be shredded in times of crisis or in tragedy. And tragically, we see often, and even in this body, to use every crisis and every tragedy as a reason to shred the Constitution, so to speak. Even today in this hearing, we see once again the attempt to punish society for the acts of an individual. This ideology, this blame shifting that's really rooted in Marxism. It's the same ideology that gives terrorists and those who commit genocide their reasoning, and demagogues throughout history to justify their actions. And truly there's no single common denominator for the truly heinous acts we've all witnessed and that we've all been heartbroken over in our nation. But if we were to look at the common denominators, one of the biggest things we see is the breakdown of the family. And that's something I certainly think that we should consider as we go forward with this. But Ms. Okafor, could you speak to what is the fastest growing gun owner demographic currently in our country?
Thank you, Congressman Cloud. The fastest growing demographic currently is actually Black women, and particular women, of course. 48% of the 8 million new gun owners that we had from 2019 to 2020 were women, and of those, 21% of them are Black women.
Any insight as to why this is happening and at this time?
Particularly with Black women, there's many reasons. One of the big reasons is because, unfortunately, Black women are one of the demographics that have been victims of violent crime. And so that is a reaction to that, of women realizing, Black women realizing that they have to take care of themselves and protect themselves. Particularly during the pandemic, we saw an increased awareness of this. And so that is part of the trend, the growing trend of Black women getting firearms.
One of the trends we've seen kind of happening concurrently with this is the defund the police movement. Do you think there's any connection there, or is that just?
Well, it's actually shown, study by study has shown that in primarily African-American communities, that many African-Americans actually prefer and want to have, of course, a stable police force to protect and serve their communities. And so despite the rhetoric behind the defund the police, et cetera, and even if so, for those who have a distrust of police, it's come down to their solution is to make sure that they have a way to defend themselves and their families, and that's what Black people across America are going towards, that solution.
It's been interesting to me, the chairwoman said at the beginning, she said the time for dodging accountability is over, and yet what we've seen is violence and crime has just increased in major cities across our country, especially in the last couple of years. A lot of it seems to be because of the lack of accountability. We continue to have almost daily stories of criminals who committed heinous acts be released only to commit heinous acts once again. And in that context, we've seen a number of people realizing that they have a need to protect themselves and to protect their families and such. We have leftist DAs in almost all of these cities where this is happening. We have an attorney general here, or Attorney General Garland, who's really laid the groundwork for an understanding that there aren't consequences for bad actions for the individual, and it's really upended the rule of law in this country, and we've seen the tragic results. I was wondering, too, if you could speak to one of the big concerns with red flag laws is that there's a discriminatory nature to them. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, as we've seen, especially with red flag laws that uniquely tend to use no-knock warrants, what we've seen in criminal justice reform, et cetera, that I think those in the Second Amendment community and those in the criminal justice reform community agree on, is that these no-knock warrants have been used especially in discriminatory practices, especially in red flag laws instances. So that is just one of the many reasons why GOA, Gun Owners of America, does not want no-knock warrants to exist, as well as red flag laws, because of the discriminatory practices used behind them.
One of the things we've seen recently too is the ATF is a massive database of gun records. It's almost 1 billion, if not that, already. And then recently we've seen that it's a searchable database, basically. Now, federal law says that they are not allowed to create a gun registry, but they have a searchable database for all practical purposes. And recently we've begun to see stories of them trying to enforce this through local law enforcement. In showing up and surveying gun, or do you have this serial number in your house and those kind of things? Does that kind of thing concern you? And how do you think that squares with the Second Amendment?
It absolutely concerns us at Gun Owners of America. When it comes down to it, is that this is what exactly why people are concerned about any type of registration, is because once registration is allowed, then it's very easy for any type of government agency to be able to use that to essentially, again, discriminate against gun owners and those that they deem to be quote unquote dangerous. And what that actually means tends to be anything from what they believe is a First Amendment difference or something like that. So when it comes down to it, that's part of the issue, is that any type of registration leads to gun confiscation in the end.
Yeah.
The gentleman's time has expired.